Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy.
Alright, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I'm your host as usual, and obviously welcome back to the show. Today's episode 267 of the show, and before we get started, we're just going to do a little bit of house cleaning around here because it only makes sense that we do it, so let's just get on with the house cleaning. I do want to say thank you guys for coming back and listening to today's episode. It does mean a lot to me. You guys constantly take time of your days to download episodes, to share these episodes, to constantly keep letting me know how you feel, whether you like my stupid face or not, or my opinions or not. At the end of the day, I greatly appreciate you guys because, again, I wouldn't keep doing this stuff if you guys weren't coming back and listening, because clearly I'm doing something that you guys seem to find entertaining, or you seem to enjoy the commentary we're doing here. I don't know why, but hey, I really enjoy it, and I really appreciate y'all for enjoying it too. Especially because some of y'all have reached out to me, and like I said, some of you have talked to me that you listen to this while you're at work, while you're driving to work. Some of them mention while they're doing their workouts, which I think is kind of weird, but hey, I guess that's just personal preference. I can't really say anything because, well, I'll be real, when I'm working out, I like to watch YouTube, so I'm weird. But aside of all that stuff, I greatly appreciate you guys for downloading these episodes, for sharing them, for constantly letting me know how you feel. And at the same time, you guys keep coming back and listening, especially because this week's episode is basically a continuation of last week's episode, even though we had other stuff happening. Because I'm going to be real with you guys, if you're not following the social media pages, what are you doing? But on the social media pages, specifically the Instagram, is where we put the polls for the episodes. And this week, it was a 50-50 draw between two topics. This topic and the other one, which is also a little bit concerning given the current pattern, the current trend that is happening in the industry right now. But let's talk about that. So we're going to talk about a continuation from last week's story, which, again, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, I highly recommend that you guys would go back and listen to it, where essentially is documenting and having a conversation about the initial, I guess, suing of YUZU, that Nintendo decided to file a lawsuit against YUZU and begun the process of taking it down. You know, they filed claims of violating DMCA claims. They violated, piracy claims. Essentially, the whole argument was surrounded around the idea that the technology in YUZU circumvented the security measures in the Switch to essentially, promote piracy, promote, I guess, pirated material, and essentially, steal shit from Nintendo. That's just the lack of the better terms. Same thing, they used points of, over 1 million people downloaded Tears of the Kingdom prior to release week. And yes, we did talk about how emulation in itself is legal, and that if they were approaching the case from emulation standpoint, then yes, they would be legal and there really wouldn't be that big of an issue. However, if you noticed it, I think we mentioned it too in the video, where we specifically mentioned, or even a lot of people also mentioned, is notice the language that is being used and what specifically they are targeting. They're not necessarily targeting emulation, even though, yes, an emulator is the prime target here. That wasn't necessarily what they were going after. They were primarily going after the Patreon, hiding features behind a paywall, hiding, certain aspects of the emulator behind a paywall. Because if you notice, a lot of big emulators are free. There's no Patreon. Like, same thing with Dolphin. Like, Dolphin is free, open source. Same thing goes for Aster, the PS player. A lot of these other emulators, if you notice, they're very, they're just, for the lack of better words, they're open source. Like, they're not hidden behind a paywall or anything like that. But YUZU clearly was, and also it is a more modern system. And so fast forward to now, and YUZU has now settled with Nintendo outside of court for $2.4 million. But as a result, they handed over the URL, the domain name. They handed over everything for the emulator. The emulator has now been shut down. Source code has been removed, wiped from the internet, but specifically YUZU themselves, they put out a press statement. And not just YUZU got taken down, because if you guys are aware, or if you are not aware, the team that makes YUZU were also the developers of the 3DS emulator Citra. And as a result, because the work was so linked together, they both got taken down. So now YUZU and Citra got taken down. So yes, now there is no longer a 3DS emulator, and now YUZU, the most popular Nintendo Switch emulator, had now been taken down. And yes, we can be mad. Yes, we can have our thoughts about Nintendo, that why are they trying to ruin great things, that, you know, this wouldn't necessarily be an issue if Nintendo would only listen to their consumers and what they actually wanted, which that's the reason why YUZU primarily existed, was to give users a way to play their Switch games at a better frame rate, and especially on PC, like give them the ability to play these games in a more refined experience, because clearly on the Switch, because as we all know, the Switch is now celebrating 7 years now. This is the 8th year of the Switch being on the market. It's running long in the tooth, and the same thing goes, like even when the Switch came out, it was already outdated hardware. It was running on a processor that was 2 years old. So it's like, realistically, the Switch was running on 2015 hardware, and yeah, it's still sold over 130 million units, but it clearly is showing its age now in 2024, basically 9 years later. That hardware is not necessarily holding up or aging so well, especially when you look at some of these bigger Nintendo experiences from their first party, like Tears of the Kingdom or even Xenoblade 3. And yes, while Monolith Soft and all these companies have worked magic to make these things even run, when you run them on YUZU, you clearly see something different. You clearly see how it's just vastly superior on better hardware, and that these experiences can truly just breathe, if that makes sense. Like you can truly experience them in all of their goodness, but with better hardware, higher frame rates, you know, get rid of a lot of those bugs. You get what I mean? But now it's gone. And same thing goes for Citra, which Citra was basically just collateral damage in this point, which really sucks, especially because Nintendo 3DS emulation, even though, yes, you can go buy a 3DS, you can homebrew it very easily. It is not hard to homebrew a 3DS, even with Nintendo trying to patch their stuff. Let's be realistic, it's not necessarily hard to patch. It's not hard to mod a 3DS. I have 2 modded 3DSs. The problem with trying to get a 3DS is, well, you got to buy one. And right now their prices are skyrocketing now that the eShop is now discontinued, so obviously a lot of those physical games are going to go up in price. Same thing for the actual hardware itself, because people know you can mod them, you can use them for emulation as well, so now they're starting to shoot up in value. So trying to get a 3DS is very difficult, especially if you want the actual good ones, which would be like the new 3DS, the new 3DS XL, the new 2DS XL. You got what I mean? Like, because yeah, you can get the OG 3DS and that's okay, but it's realistically dog shit. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I would avoid that one like the plague. Same thing goes with the original 3DS XL, especially with the new models existing. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to get them just because of their hardware flaws. And then obviously you get more power with the new 3DSs. But Citra was a very popular emulator. Yes, it wasn't updated for a while just because the YUZU team, you know, they were the ones who made Citra. Then when they had YUZU, they were like, hey, this is the big money maker, so let's put all the attention on this. And it just got left alone. Now, it still ran everything perfectly fine. Obviously, the better the hardware you had, the better the chances are you are mitigating some of the issues. Even though, yeah, let's be realistic. If you have a 3DS modded, I would just mod your 3DS and play everything natively and enjoy it like that, you know? But obviously, some people prefer the Citra emulation, and same thing, you can also upscale it, make it look even better, get rid of a lot of those jagged edges and stuff like that, so you can make everything look nice and pretty. But what does this mean for the future of emulation? Because there are a lot of, I guess, fear mongers, or a lot of complaints. A lot of people are worried. They're like, oh, emulation is dead, they're gonna take down all the emulators. And I'm just gonna say here, guys, yes, we don't know what the outcome is, but most likely they're not going to do jack squat. Let's be realistic here. Emulation has still been proven time and time again that it is legal. And yes, even though it has not been tested in the court of law with DMCA claims and things like that, it is still legal because emulation has been proven to be legal based off the DMCA laws. Now, I think it's also beneficial at the same time that this case was settled outside of court. Obviously, it was settled. There was no trial. There was no discovery and things like that. Even though, yes, more details are coming out of some of the dirt Nintendo had on YUZU, whether it be messages from their Patreon, messages on their Discord. Like, Nintendo clearly, they were doing their homework. The ninjas know what they were doing. The Nintendo ninjas clearly were deep in YUZU. They knew what was going on, and they had a lot of stuff on them. And I think even the YUZU team, like, to settle for $2.4 million and shut it all down, especially the day after they announced that they had legal counsel now, shows that Nintendo must have had some deep stuff on them. Let's just be realistic here. But I think it's also smart that they took the settlement, because it doesn't set any legal precedent, because that is the biggest concern, was if there were to be a legal case and this went to trial and things like that, and Nintendo were to win in this case and set legal precedent, then we'd have a whole bigger problem here. But nothing happened. It settled outside of court, so all fine, love and ward. Now, what does this mean for emulators like Ryujinx, which is now the only Switch emulator that's currently on the market? And currently, Ryujinx seems to be chilling well. Again, it's open source. I don't seem to have a Patreon or anything. If anything, we've also noticed how Drastic DS, it was a popular emulator for Nintendo DSs on Android, now became free after the announcement of YUZU going down, which I think makes sense, especially because I think some of these emulators are starting to realize, like, hey guys, like, maybe charging for some of these things will probably get you in trouble, specifically in Nintendo, and hiding things behind paywalls. Now, granted, I don't necessarily think Nintendo cares about the DS and that, especially the original DS. Like, they're not doing anything for it. The 3DS, they're still, yeah, they put some circumventions, put out some patches that were in an attempt to get rid of all the jailbroken stuff and get rid of the modding scene. But clearly, people found a way. They broke that thing in basically like a day. So it doesn't really matter. But it does set some scary precedents going forward, in the sense that, well, YUZU is gone. Now, it doesn't mean it is gone forever. It just means YUZU in its current form is gone forever. But clearly the source code is out there. The internet doesn't forget. There are clearly people that have these files, and eventually there will come a day, like when the Switch is not the primary console, that yes, they're probably going to bring it back. Let's just be real. Obviously, maybe not YUZU, but obviously the source code is there. There are certain things that they can do that not the YUZU team, but other people will do, because that's just the name of the game. Is like, it's like that old saying, you cut a Hydra's head off, 3 heads will grow in its place. And that's essentially what's going to happen. This has always happened with emulation. It's been shown time and time again. When you try to take one down, more will just sprout. If anything, it will get people more invigorated to want to bring it back, or even do something better, if that makes sense. Now, if anything, this does set some interesting, I guess, not precedent, that's not the word that I want to use, but it does change the dynamic for certain aspects. Like, I was seeing how there's a channel I like to follow called the Retro Game Core, and they primarily talk about, retro handhelds, like handhelds that people like to use to emulate other systems. And these are like the Retro Pocket 4, 4 Pro, the Ionode and 2, same thing like these Windows machines, like the Windows handhelds, same thing like other, like the Amberneck and things like that. Like all of these retro handhelds that people like to use to, well, emulate older systems and play their games on the go. And one of them that was a popular thing, specifically with the Ionode 2, was testing Switch performance using YUZU, because YUZU does have an Android app. And now it's gone. So this is going to affect some of those people when it comes to testing hardware, because some people like to use YUZU and even Citra as a way to test the performance or the capabilities of the hardware they're reviewing as a benchmark. But now that's gone, so obviously they're going to have to change up how they do things. So that's another side effect of this happening. But I think overall, I think it was a smart decision, objectively speaking, that they settled out of court and took the L in that aspect, especially because if they were settling that quick, that means Nintendo had a lot of stuff on them, which again, it was imperative with how Nintendo was tackling, because they were not tackling on the debate of emulation being legal, but more of proving that they had stolen files, that they had done some illegal stuff in the background, which as more things are coming out, it's starting to seem that way, especially when it comes to, well, what happened was that they had hid patches for Tears of the Kingdom behind their paywall on their Patreon and had messages. And so it was just a really messy situation that clearly they knew what they were doing. And it was only a matter of time before they got caught, which I'm like, hey, bro, if you messed up that bad, then take the L on the chin. You know, it is what it is. But yes, obviously a lot of people are sad. Like for me, I personally have YUZU on my PC. I recently got it set up before all this happened, and it still runs great. Obviously, I still have the file on my computer. So, you know, if anything else were to come out, like for example, like some new game and it doesn't work, well, Emoto, it doesn't work. So, but everything I have right now, or at least anything that I'm putting on it right now, works fine. So, hey, I'm just going to keep enjoying it, the one that I have. And same thing, Citra, still trying to get that, but I already have my modded 3disc, so I'm pretty much chilling. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Are you guys sad, or are you guys mad that Nintendo took down, you know, YUZU, or and vice versa, basically took down Citra at the same time, which they killed two birds with one stone? But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Are you guys mad? Are you guys upset? Or are you guys like, hey, it is what it is? Or are you guys excited to see what the future of emulation holds? Because again, you cut off one head, 3 more will come back. That's how it always has been with emulation, and that's realistically what's always going to happen is, well, emulators will always find a way, and the source code is still out there. People already have it downloaded. They have it hidden away. So clearly the internet never forgets, and they're just going to find a way to bring it back. Maybe not the YUZU team, but somebody else will bring Switch emulation back. And who knows, maybe in the rises or the ashes of YUZU, we might get 3 fully fledged, fully featured Switch emulators. And so now Ryujinx is still there, but then something even better than YUZU will come out. But who knows? At the end of the day, we'll see what happens, because as long as no legal precedent was set, we're pretty much balling. I think that's the best takeaway from all of this stuff, is that I'm not saying we didn't want it to go to court, but I'm saying is that it would have been a scary situation if it were to go to court and Nintendo won, because then it would set legal precedent, and then it's going to lead into a whole other can of worms. But that's all I really have for you guys, is just giving an update and having a conversation about, you know, what happened, what transpired, and just sharing some of these thoughts and some of these concerns that people have, especially when you look at it from the emulation scene. Same thing for the retro handheld scene, because again, these are useful tools and useful resources that are now, well, gone, especially when you look at some of the statements given by YUZU that, yeah, it was completely taken down, you know, concerns that they basically admitted that piracy, that their, you know, their platform, their software was being used for piracy reasons, even though, let's be real, like, when you read the statement, it kind of looks like they had a loaded gun to their head from Nintendo, but it is what it is, you know? But I hope you guys enjoy this week's episode. I hope you found it informative. And same thing goes, that other topic that we voted on the poll, because again, that was a very popular topic that you guys are really interested in, and we will have a deep dive about it. So that'll probably be next week's episode, to be honest with you guys. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Same thing goes, guys. If you're not following the social media pages, please go follow social media, because that is where you guys get to see the polls. That's where you get to see, well, I guess behind the curtain a little bit about my life, if, you know, that tickles your fanny, if you're interested in finding out more about me. But because I don't know why, but I guess if you want to vote on the polls, you can just go there. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. The links are all down below, but I will see you guys next week. Bye, guys.
Hey there, thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.